Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to The Explainer, where we take complex, sometimes confusing topics and break them down into clear visual takeaways. Today, we're focusing on a fascinating and honestly, absolutely crucial subject: the 12 hidden behavioral changes that go hand in hand with aging. We spend so much time talking about the physical signs of growing older, right? The gray hair, the aching joints, but the behavioral shifts, those are really talked about, and yet they can completely transform a person's quality of life. So our goal today is to look at these behaviors systematically, and most importantly, with deep compassion.
Have you ever noticed a loved one change? I want you to just take a second and picture your own aging family members. Maybe it's a parent, a grandparent, or even just an older neighbor you know well. Have you noticed them suddenly getting kind of stubborn? Or maybe they're pulling away and isolating themselves a bit. Or perhaps they've started picking up habits that seem to, well, actively push their loved ones away. The truth is, aging doesn't just change the body, it completely rewires the mind and behavior in profound ways. These hidden habits quietly impact their health and their relationships with you, but because we rarely talk about them openly, we often have no clue how to actually handle them.
To make sense of all this, we're going to follow a clear roadmap today. First, the hidden changes. Second, habits of retreat. Third, neglect and physical decline. Fourth, relational friction. And finally, reversing the cycle. This roadmap is going to help us break down these behaviors systematically and uncover some truly actionable solutions.
All right, section 1, the hidden changes. This is where we look at the iceberg model. And this brilliantly illustrates why shifting our perspective from frustration to understanding is the absolute first step. To really get what's going on with an aging loved one, we have to look way past the surface. Think of it like an iceberg. When a senior develops a difficult or, ugly habit, that behavior is just the tiny tip of the iceberg sticking out of the water. It totally doesn't mean they're suddenly becoming a bad person. What we see on top are the ugly habits, the sudden stubbornness, the refusal to leave the house. But underneath the waterline, that's a massive foundation of deeper struggles, physical decline, emotional hurdles, deep-seated loneliness, and frankly, a real fear of losing their independence. We literally cannot fix the behavior until we recognize the fear and pain driving it. That brings us straight to section 2, habits of retreat. Let's look at how and why seniors pull away. When seniors pull away from their environment and the people who love them, it usually takes the form of 4 key habits: isolation, withdrawing from hobbies, stopping exercise, and living entirely in the past. And these often start super quietly. A senior might just stop showing up to family dinners, or they avoid picking up the phone. Maybe they drop the gardening or that reading group they used to absolutely love. They stop taking walks because they fear getting hurt or they just feel too tired. And eventually, they retreat into their own history, relying purely on past memories while losing all interest in the present. Now, at first, it might just seem like they're slowing down, which feels totally harmless, right? But this retreat drastically increases feelings of loneliness and massively spikes the risk of falls. Let's move to and see how this builds into a really dangerous trap. It forms a vicious downward cycle. Step 1, they lose interest in a hobby. Step 2, that sudden inactivity inevitably leads to a lower mood and symptoms of depression. Step 3, that lower mood just zaps their remaining energy, which leads to even less activity. Once this cycle starts spinning, it is incredibly difficult to break out of. But hey, here is the good news. Staying socially and mentally engaged is one of the strongest predictors of healthy aging. The human brain doesn't just clock out when you hit retirement age. Neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to form new connections, that continues throughout our entire lives. So having new experiences, meeting new friends, learning new skills, these remain deeply beneficial even in later years. The mind absolutely craves engagement. Let's move on to section 3, neglect and physical decline. This is the phase where personal upkeep and self-care can suddenly drop off, which, let's be honest, can be super alarming for family members to witness. The 3 main habits here are neglecting personal hygiene, poor nutrition, and overdependence on family. You might notice a loved one bathing way less frequently, or just wearing the exact same clothes day after day. Maybe they stop cooking and start relying entirely on highly processed foods, or they just barely eat at all. You might also see them prematurely give up their independence, asking you to do things they are actually still physically perfectly capable of doing. This poor nutrition weakens their energy, while the loss of hygiene and independence severely damages their self-confidence and their physical health. Now, the biggest mistake we tend to make is the assumption that this is all just a normal part of getting older. We think, well, of course they don't want to shower or cook. they're elderly. Actually, scratch that. The reality tells a completely different story. These behaviors shouldn't be dismissed as inevitable. They are blaring sirens. They signal underlying issues like clinical depression, severe fatigue, or early memory problems. These habits are essentially cries for help that deserve our immediate support. Okay, shifting gears to section 4, relational friction. This is the hardest part.
These are the habits that directly clash with family members, adult children, and caregivers. And man, they cause real emotional pain. These 5 habits can literally tear families apart. Stubbornness, constant complaining, excessive criticism, suspicion, and hoarding possessions. Think about it. A senior might violently resist any new routine. They might vent constantly about every single ache and pain, casting this heavy cloud of negativity. They might become hypercritical of the very people trying to care for them. Or worse, they develop intense suspicion, fully believing people are stealing from them. And finally, hoarding, where holding on to a few items turns into massive safety hazards. These behaviors severely damage trust.
But again, we have to look beneath the iceberg here. When you're on the receiving end of constant criticism and stubbornness, it feels like a total personal attack, right? It's endlessly frustrating. But what is the vulnerable reality? What's actually happening in their head? It's a profound fear of the future. It's a desperate attempt to hold on to familiar comforts in a world that is just changing way too fast for them. When they feel like they're losing control over their body and their life, they try to exert control wherever they can, even if it means lashing out at you. Empathy is absolutely our greatest tool here.
So, how do we actually fix this? That brings us to section 5, reversing the cycle.
When trying to reverse this downward spiral, arguments just don't work. Logic often doesn't work either, but compassion and highly targeted actions absolutely do. So the crucial point is captured perfectly in this quote from our source material. Gratitude and positive social interactions can improve emotional well-being at any age. It proves that small, intentional shifts in focus make a remarkable difference. You don't need a massive life overhaul to help an aging loved one. You just need to reintroduce tiny sparks of positivity and connection.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how incredibly practical this action plan is. Look at how each intervention directly targets the habits we just discussed. First, pay attention to small changes so you can catch problems early, right before that vicious cycle even starts. Second, encourage regular social contact. Even just a weekly visit or a daily phone call does wonders to prevent isolation. Third, maintain daily routines to ensure they keep moving and eating healthy meals. And finally, consult a healthcare professional. Don't write off bad behavior. Evaluate it for medical or emotional concerns. These small interventions yield massive quality of life results. Before we wrap everything up, just take a quick moment to read over this disclaimer. The information in this explainer is for educational purposes only. It's not a substitute for professional medical advice, so always make sure to consult your healthcare provider before making any changes to medical care, diets, or exercise routines.
And that brings us to the end of our explainer. You know, aging is not about inevitably becoming weaker, grumpier, or disconnected. It's really just about adapting. And with patience, awareness, and support, the seniors in our lives can absolutely continue living vibrant, rewarding lives. So I want to leave you with this question to think about. Which of these habits have you noticed the most, either in yourself or in someone you love? Take a moment to reflect on that. We would absolutely love to hear your experiences, so please share your thoughts with us in the comments. Keep learning, keep paying attention to those small changes, and thank you so much for exploring this with me today.